On behalf of the UT Libraries, I am very pleased to be hosting Rexley Jim for tonight's reading. My name is Gina Bastone, and I'm the Humanities Librarian for English Literature and Women's and Gender Studies. And I also coordinate the UT Poetry Center, which is just to your right in the corner back there. We'll be having a reception after the reading, including a book signing, and there will be some materials about the Native American and Indigenous Studies program here at UT. As well as, please take a moment to look at the exhibit that's on display in this Poetry Center. We've included a number of works of poetry by other Diné Navajo poets and poets from other Southwest tribes, and we have some really great work featured, so I do hope you can take a few minutes to browse. So now I'm pleased to introduce Professor Luis Cárcamo Huechante. He's the Director of Native American and Indigenous Studies here at UT.
Good afternoon. Mari Mari Pulamgen, Mari Mari Pupeñi, Mari Mari Compuche. An indigenous Mapuche greeting in the language of my people, the Mapuche people from South America. A moment to welcome everyone, and also a moment to welcome our guest speaker, poet Rexley Jim. I am Luis Cárcamo Huechante, Director of Native American and Indigenous Studies, NAIS, here at the University of Texas, Austin. I welcome everyone to this important event, a poetry reading by our special guest, Rexley Jim, a prominent poet, public figure, and tribal member of the Navajo Nation. For this poetry reading, we, as NAIS, were able to collaborate with the UT Poetry Center and humanities librarian Gina Bastone. I am in deep gratitude to Gina and the UT Poetry personnel for engaging in collaboration. I also want to thank colleagues James Cox from the Department of English, Polly Strong, Anthropology, and Anthony Webster, Anthropology, who helped us to give shape to the marvelous display of books of poetry by Navajo authors here, down there in the UT Poetry Center. My special thanks to Alicia Ramirez, Administrative Assistant of NAIS, and the students who have been helping us in the organization of today's event. We are also giving brochures about NAIS programs out there. Our students, Isel Garcia and Andy Harrington, are helping us in all this. Finally, let me especially thank Professor Anthony Webster from the Department of Anthropology and a member of the NAIS Advisory Council, who has been at the heart of everything for this important event. Professor Webster will be hosting the event this evening and will introduce our guest poet and speaker to you, poet Rexley Jim. Welcome.
Thank you, Luis. So Luis introduced me, so I don't have to introduce me. About 17 years ago, March of 2000, I was in Shiprock, New Mexico on the Navajo Nation. I was there trying to figure out a dissertation project. My previous project had unexpectedly fallen through. I was talking with a linguist named Clay Slate, and we were talking about my interests, and I mentioned that I was deeply interested in poetry and poetics. Clay then suggested that I should meet with someone. So he called him and asked him if he'd meet with me. The person said yes, and then went on to add that he was at the Navajo Nation Inn having lunch, and if I could get down there in a timely manner, then he'd meet with me. The restaurant was in Window Rock, Arizona, the capital of the Navajo Nation. A fair drive, but I had a rental car. There was only a touch of snow in the mountains, and so I gave it a go. The poet I met that day, and really someone who set me on my career track, for better or for worse, was Rexley Jim. Over the course of our conversation that day, I formulated a dissertation project, an ethnography of Navajo poetry and poetics. It's a project that I have continued on for the last 17 years. Jim had already written his 3 books of poetry, 2 all in Navajo and 1 in Navajo, Gaelic, and English, and was teaching at Diné College in Saline, Arizona. Jim has gone on to be a tribal council member and then vice president of the Navajo Nation, though in an interview in the Navajo Times in April of 2015, while he was still vice president, Jim said, quote, "I'm a poet. I always say if I'm going to be defined as anything, it's a poet," end quote. I think of Jim as a poet as well, and all that is entailed in that, a kind of fearlessness in the use of language and a willingness to remind us, all of us, of our shared humanity and what that might necessitate. I was struck again by that quality when Jim and I and Laura Tohe, the current Navajo Nation Poet Laureate, were at a poetry event in Columbia, South Carolina in November. It was there, I might add, that Jim and I talked about him coming to Austin to do a reading, and I am especially appreciative to NACE and the Poetry Center for their eagerness in making this happen. I should say something about Navajo poetry since the UT Poetry Center is honoring their work, and so I'll say something simple, but first a story. When I was doing field work in 2000-2001, I asked Jim what made Navajo poetry, and as was often the case, he took my question and turned it around and asked me what I thought made Navajo poetry. I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. I hope in some ways I never do. Because I feel like when I have that answer, I'll have lost a kind of essential curiosity, the kind of curiosity that is often the hallmark of Jim's poetry. Before I did field work, I read as much of the published Navajo poetry that I could get my hands on. And I found it all very, very serious. When I went to my first poetry reading, the thing that surprised me was the laughter. Navajo audience members laughed, the poets laughed. I had completely missed the humor of the poems. The books on display here, and the poets they represent, bring back so many fond memories for me, so much humor. So that's the simple thing about Navajo poetry. And like most simple things, it's easily missed. One of my most vivid memories from doing fieldwork on Navajo poetry was an interview that I did with Jim in October of 2000 at Saad, Canyon de Chelly. It was a clear, crisp night. The stars were out, and I interviewed him about his poetry at one of the overlooks that looked down to the canyon, though, to be honest, it was dark, and so the view was obscured downward. Upwards was another story. The stars predominated. Indeed, Jim recited a poem about stars that night, or a star, or a particular asterism. I tape recorded the interview, because we used to tape record things. And it's a tape I have returned to often, an interview that I have thought about often. It's a poem I have thought a good deal about as well. They have gone to work on me in many ways. Towards the end of the interview, the conversation turned to what it was that Jim wrote poetry about and the meanings behind his poems. What he said has guided a fair amount of my thinking about his poetry to this day. And so I want to leave you with these words spoken by Jim in October of 2000 as a way, finally, to introduce Rexley Jim. Quote, "There's always, the poems presents and identifies a problem. I shouldn't say always. Many of the poems identifies a problem and at the same time offers a solution of something. And I will not tell you about that. You have to come to that yourself. Indeed, we must all come to that ourselves. And that is the humane promise of Rexley Jim's poetry. And so it is my great pleasure to introduce Rexley Jim."
Yad she Rexley Jim yin she can cheat yin she got cheat you bashishtin kia ani da she chedo na kid net da shenale senza des adona sha tadel don't you hold ye ko eke hashta. I'm often asked if I prefer to be identified as American Indian or Native American. And I say, I have no idea what that means. Then they ask me, do you prefer Navajo or Diné? My response is the same. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm of the Red House people of Southwest Rock Point. a place called Tadiltoni. We are that specific of who we are in introducing ourselves. Born for a certain clan, then we end up talking about who our grandparents are. And so I have another friend whose father told him, the day you become Navajo, that's the day you lose your language and who you are. And so when we introduce ourselves, we are very specific. And so I would like to believe that I write most of my work in Navajo because that's who I am. The more specific, unique, and distinctly Navajo I become in my writing, people tend to respond more to my work. And I thought about that and realized that the more Navajo and unique and distinct I become, the more human I become. And when I begin to reach within the depth of humanity, I can rise anywhere on the surface of the earth and be at home with others. Because we do have that human connection, and that's important. Thank you. I will be all over the place with my reading. And then it'll be your job to make some sense out of it. So I'll start with the most recent poem that I'm working on. When you're a writer, you always carry several notebooks with you, different shapes and form, and here's another one, and I have an iPad, and then I have my phone, and so I talked a little bit about this last night at dinner, and then I was handed some pamphlets by, I guess, some people or Catholics or whatever they were. So I looked at that, and so before I came here, I started writing this poem, and this is how it begins. It's not done yet, but it says, Jesus wept, I heard. I wept too, for his weeping. Jesus, don't come back yet. Jews continue to kill Jews in Israel. Christians continue to kill Christians. The new Gentiles. Don't come back yet. You may weep again, and they just might kill you again. This time, the Christians might kill you in your own name. I'm not sure where that will go, but this is a poem I will read, but it's in Navajo. I won't translate. I won't know how to do it. But I want you just to listen to the rhythm and the sound of the language. Sometimes certain poems are not translatable, not because of content or concepts, but because of sound. You cannot replicate that. Táá Kóó Diné. She, hayol kart as kinshne. Karne ehli bigide shine achosholz. Bigide shine achosholz. Aji shine noselz. Nti do bashen neta. Bashel khojo. Khala awetche alzechat chayen bigide shine chahosolz. Adin chahosolz. Nle khagishi naskos chiz ahoyolz kesho hajo isnz hadishit enle shantin ta hisdel belahti alelek ahoyolz digingo hahosilz ilingo hahosilz shiketi in begin dis adi khayilka asetsedi zeketzin hatnigo sindis Aita hos in. Alelek eko bine disa titsa. Shalati shetje. Tsesek to the zengo singo. Households in households hayol kar hayol ka hayol chil haoch. She in el class A, she told us in el class A. She yodder el class Asian is el class A. Debil she never sold in debil your car, debil or chill. House holds in house seals in a house seals in a house seals in house seals in hosils in hosils in seals in seals in. That poem is about the first sound, and then it ends in a juniper tree. But it comes back out of that juniper tree. And you know, the Navajo cradle board is made out of juniper tree. So the whole poem is about any sound, whatever sounds important to us, that's what we pass on to our kids who's in that cradle board. And then it makes a lot of references to songs and prayers from the past and the future. And so it's this one I will read in Navajo and then do the attempt at English. Saad. Hode yada hunshlo, atada hunshlo. Dije hunshlo, yiskago hunshlo, ahoyel ago hunshlo. Saad shinshle, saad digini, shinshle, saad digini, di shinshle. Shen zahakes, shen hat she zohdezin. Shen it she yatki, saad shinshle, saad digini, shinshle, saad digini, di shinshle. Zadat anst ego hunshlo. Shen nachet zahakes at art, shen nachet nahat at art. Shenachet Sorizan at art, Shenachet Sin at art, Shenachet Saad at art, Saad Shinshle, Saad Digini, Shinshle, Saad Digini, Di Shinshle. Shenachet Ina at class A Hullon, all in class A Yiste, Yodel class A Yiste, and as a class A Yiste. Die bin jenne hokate ne paten stan hokate ne digini hokate ne illini hokate ne jobai. Die bi jenne hosist inko I not on the nesko ke ayiljish. Die bin jenne hokate ne paten stan saad shinshle saad digini shinshle saad digini di shinshle. Ahoyel ago hunshlo is kago hunshlo. Die jen hunshlo atada Hunshlo, hode yada hunshlo, saad shinshle, saad digini, shinshle, saad digini, di shinshle. It's translated as language. So normally I translate it as voice or expression. In the beginning yesterday I was, Today I am, tomorrow I will be, forever I will be. Language I am, sacred language I am. Sacred language, this I am. People think with me, people act with me, people pray with me, people sing with me, people speak with me. Language I am, sacred language I am. Sacred language, this I am. I come in many different forms. Because of me, people think differently. Because of me, people act differently. Because of me, people pray differently. Because of me, people sing differently. Because of me, people speak differently. Language I am. Sacred language I am. Sacred language, this I am. Because of me, there are many different cultures. I value different ways of doing. I value different goods. I value very hard goods. These are why I gave myself to the earth's surface people, a holy people, a respectful people, a compassionate people. From within them I sound. In this way, life continues to expand. These are reasons why I gave myself to the earth's surface people. Language I am. Sacred language I am. Sacred language, this I am. Forever I will be. Tomorrow I will be. Today I am. Yesterday I was. In the beginning I was. Language I am. Sacred language I am. Sacred language, this I am. This one is a poem about spring. Now as we offer sacred jewels or through songs and prayers and places out in the desert. Sometimes it's just a wet spot. And water is sacred, and so we do a lot of stuff out there through prayers and songs and offering to the water, so there might be rain. In fact, in many ways, every time we say something or eat something, or some of the ending phrase we say is "Nahaltka" or "Nahatolti," may it rain. And my grandfather was a medicine man, so I observed him do this a lot of time. But right now we have, in those places, we have a lot of windmills. And I will read it in Navajo first and then in English. And then in the Navajo, there's a phrase in English that sort of hard to translate into Navajo. I was just reading a chapter by Tony just on that one word, so if you want to learn more about it, you can read that chapter. Tochale, Khodigin go lahaz and et tapenashni, anst esikoshe a complicated say yan. Dido yo benashni ta kato. But keko na hast akondi hast ti enadi zani kato bat keko naga hast ti sane sali tapenashni. Has a competency kine is clapet at jago, a yochico, a conage ajna, shade zade, chidinil pasgo, isn't dash that nigot adi, is a tand a archigo desh ingo, Osandal Jorne, Nta Jordan, Da Jorne, Argo, Dat Nitne, Dat del Chilne, Kayat Asa and a Trobe the Sonsne, O Hojoni Yetne, O Hojoni Yet a Sedan Shinque at e Tapenashni, Kare que Pesh e a Niol, Pesh Nayol, but Ote so yanko, caged a deichi, a yashas a dadel tahianko, Gagi, Eta Tahalsa, is Tahajahago, Atlani, Eta del wash. So there's in Beyatat yanko, fuck you, Eta titsa. Nahasan Shamahat Nigo, Puisan Shamahat Nigo, Beyatat yanko, you want a good fuck, go see Sue or Mama. Ebe a get ashch. Trobe, da hat the Sosiego, Beje Holone Beziste, that glad. Hodin has aunt etne. Tapenashni. On Zade, Basgo. Ndistoko, E. Sata. Hodin has aunt etne. Nde. Do Yobenashnita. Spring. The place used to be sacred. I still remember. I was only a kid when I followed my grandfather there, but I don't remember everything. Still, the man got well. Now he's healthy, walking about. He has become an old man. I still remember we went there with this man. Heart jewels were selected for offering. They went there carrying the jewels. My grandfather and that man went there to that spring out in the middle of nowhere. I sat in the truck parked some distance away. I was told to stay in the truck, so I stayed behind. And when I looked to the west, clouds floated about, showers drifted about. To the west, thunders rolled, and lightning flashed. The whole land sparkled in water. The whole land was beautiful. Yes, it was beautiful. I think this may be the place I still remember. Now, a windmill is standing here. The wind spins the metal. Where grass grew, sand dunes roll. Where young birds used to travel, only crows hop about. Where sacred jewels were offered, naked women spreading their legs or depicted on metal. Where sacred songs were heard, drunks yell. Where prayers were offered, people scream, fuck you. Where people prayed, earth, my mother, water woman, my mother. Where people related to the place. You want a good fuck? Go see Sue or Mama or scribble onto metal barrels. Where the earth sparkled in water, wine bottles reflect in the sun, beer cans shine up the place. The place used to be sacred. I remember. I am parked some distance away, sitting in my truck, taking a slug now and then. The place used to be sacred. But then, I don't remember everything. It is sad to see, all these sacred places. So not only Navajos are doing this to Navajo places, but there are sacred rock art that's out there, and non-Navajos are coming in using whatever tools they need to take it out and then selling it in Europe and other places, and have no regard for what's sacred. And so we do need to address some of these issues. Next one is called hunger, the chin. I'll read it in Navajo first and then English. Dúchas Táá Kóó Diné, la big mac that you need go Áhí Ni Nikisheegiizh. At St. That's at Epa, but that's a card go. Nan say class Edo, Dini Ego betra. Ayo betchen, Alkin the ski. Becare the Inda, Neshogit or a squid what on ni. La e pizza at Nigo, Áhí Ni Nikisheegiizh. Nikinat al Neko, Hodina. Nanes card the con Gego ha a Yanil card. Chil betro, Gesa Beltanash Gizgo. At St. Yajabakat the Nitrango. Ak bese skigo, nada jotan. Shitsile etla. Huge as dokid. Shanale etro inda. Into the go na yisni. Bugo atten dobel na altskindi. Dobel skiko na da yidenej raj. Arencha halkeel bigich a not nil korko. Nikilin ke ilwot. Tlats a can't dates up. At hinged Asian not yitra. Nke nishke hart ishta banda ikiel nisingo. Hunger. We were in Farmington until late afternoon. Some wanted Big Mac, so we went there. Meat patties thrown between buns mixed with tossed salad really fixed young craving bellies, forever hungry. Only the aftertaste was displeasurable, I was told. Others wanted pizza, and we went there too. We watched a piece of pizza being made for a while. An extra large tortilla was spread out, topped with plant juice and melted cheese. And on top of that, small pieces of meat were scattered. Polished with grease, they really ate up that one too. My younger brother wanted a bite from both, but they didn't let him. My paternal grandmother didn't eat until we got back to Shiprock, where she bought a kneel-down bread. Although toothless and the bread dried her throat, she really enjoyed her meal. With dimming lights, I began the long drive home in total darkness. Some slept peacefully and others snored, and with sleepy eyes glued to the road, I drove on, wondering what they were dreaming about. If you know anything about politics, there was a rival between a person called Peter MacDonald. So obviously the Big Mac refers to that, and the other one's Peterson Za, so pizza refers to pizza. And when we were growing up, Peterson Za was already in place, so he was sort of like Big Macs, already all dressed up with a tie and everything. But when Peterson Za got into office, we saw him becoming a leader, and he was a little bit more traditional, so therefore the reference to the tortilla and so it is a political statement. But if you understand Navajo politics and a lot of the references in Navajo, it makes sense. But if you do it in English, people say it's about junk food. I said, come on, politics, not junk. That's wonderful stuff, you know. So and then let me read some current stuff that I'm working on. This one is titled Escucho. Escucho y I try to hear, but a multitude of voices afuera de casa de poesía takes me back to dogs sparking in Navajo country, reminding me de penaca. And my stomach growls, donde está carnitas con tortilla y roasted green chili, escucho, y I try to hear. But the cicada-like songs remind me of summer heat waves of northern Arizona. Y las zonas de lluvia me llevan a las nubes oscuras rising in la tierra Navajo. Mi voz rises too. So I was talking to Tony and saying that I'm going to be heading to Costa Rica in May, and there's an individual there who wants to work with me and translate a lot of my poems from Navajo to Spanish, so I look forward to that. The next one is called Darkness. Oh, pure darkness, when you are at your darkest, vast and everlasting, you focus my eyes to see stories against the vast sky. I see poetic stellar designs, blinding poets of the past, making them grasp for words as you throw stars across the horizon of earth, burning with desire that lovers can only dream of. Oh, vast and great darkness, at your core, I hear crickets sing in chorus, my hearing magnified to hear rivulets serenading the spirits of the night, the awesome darkness. Deep inside you, lovers moan with passion, and new life comes alive. And in the depth of the sweat lodge, songs are sung and prayers are uttered, and the spirit lives and moves in the heart of darkness, in your heart, in your obscurity, O eternal darkness. In you, I give light to the world. The faster they make these computers, the slower they become. This one is also still in progress. We were looking at masks, and so it's just for now tentatively called masks. See, in Indian country, we in the ritual dances or ritual drama, we use a lot of different kinds of masks too. This one I was playing around with when I was visiting the Baruca people in southern Costa Rica and looking at their masks, and so you might there's a phrase in there that I'm not really, I forgot how to pronounce it correctly, so there's a name in there you probably know. Rhythms of ancient dances lurk just behind those eyes, eyes carved by yearning hearts, lurking steps wanting to dance stories, and would love to move those stories and rhythms of ever-expanding cycles spiraling into vast azure sky. But before that, my body needs to learn new moves, moves that defy the mind, perhaps even the spirit, masks of ancient songs that want to be prayed and danced. I see one with feathers of birds, birds I don't see, birds I don't know. hints of their songs in the forest, but I don't understand. Did I just hear the voice of Tatika Kwaswan? Did I just hear him say, masks also can save face? Put it on, Tony. And as if commanded, Tony puts on a feathered mask. Just then, Tatika Kwaswan whisper, see? I perform miracles too, in silence. I think Tatika Kwaswan. I love to travel, and there were a group of friends and I, we have, from the college, we used to put a trip together. And we don't want to go travel and hang out where tourists hang out, because most of the tourists are from America, and you don't want to see them over there. They're embarrassing. So we set it up where only indigenous peoples, especially Navajos, would come together, and we travel the Americas and visit other indigenous peoples. And so we did a lot of exchanges like that, and wonderful work. And in one of those places, we do different kinds of exercises. I'm a playwright too, and I'm an actor and producer, and so my family and I would do stuff like this. So we do a lot of theater exercises. And one time we were doing what's called the mirroring exercise too, and really have a connection. So we were asked to write out because of that. So I did that, and I tried, and it's called connection. Oh, I'm supposed to mirror you in this dance, but I'll ask you right from the beginning, my dear love, you were so fast I couldn't keep up. I felt like you took me for granted, misstepping with you most of the time. Please, slow down for me so I can be suave contigo. You need to breathe and listen. Listen to how the songs of the forest are in accord, not one voice wanting to take over, but not needing to control, but playing together, singing the song of the forest, the song of the universe. Can't we slow down so we can move with one continuous movement, with heart, with song? My love, I so much want to sing with you. I'm also a medicine man, a blessing way singer. So I know hundreds of songs and prayers that we chant, all of that. So sometimes I have songs similar to it, or poems, and I will do one of those. And normally, like the songs and prayers we do, I don't translate it, but I just do it in Navajo. And so I will do maybe a couple of those for you, just to give you an idea. But these are not sacred songs that you use in ceremonies. It's similar to that and based on that, but just understand that they're not the songs we use in ceremonies. I just made them up. So, hey, 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 na. Hey, 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 na. She, hey, hey, na sha. She, hey, hey, na shanga. She, hey, na shanga. Hosolzil, hosolzil. Hosolzil, hosolzil. She kellat kato hosolzil. Shekodlat kato hosolzil. Shenido hosolzil. Shedlat kato hosolzil. Shegoslat kato hosolzil. Shinilat Kato Hosolti, Shinalat Kato Hosolti, Shazalat Kato Hosolti, Shet Oslat Kato Hosolti, Shay, yay, Alel, Shay, Nashanga, Shay, Alel, Shay, Nasha, get show, Isn't, get show, Isn't, Hosolti, It's translated, I guess, as Shei means I am walking in a spiritual way, From the tip of my feet, it sounds. From my knees, it sounds. From the top of my hips, it sounds. From my chest, it sounds. From my shoulders, it sounds. From the tip of my cheeks, it sounds. From my eyes, it sounds. And from the tip of my tongue, it sounds. From the tip of my feather, it sounds. I am walking in a spiritual way, Shh. Listen. Listen. It sounds. And somebody one time asked me, what sounds? I said, listen. If you hear something, whether it's a laughter, follow it. What does it do to you? If someone's crying, listen to it. So focus on one sound and let it work on you, the whole body, and move with it. See where it takes you. So. Next one is called the Dúchas Táá Kóó Diné, in the middle of the white cornfield. Ay, yay, na. Ay, yay, na. Shay, na sha. Shay, na sha. Dúchas Táá Kóó Diné, Shay, na sha. Na talkri. Lasti icha ande na talkri hanisa. Na taltsu. Lasti icha ande na taltsu hanisa. Na tantotlir. Lasti icha ande na tantotlir hanisa. Na tashin, Lasti icha ande na tashin hanisa. Ilasti Áhí Hatanse. Sazalat Kato and saad Hosolti. Yay, Anna. Yay, Anna. Shay, Nasha. Shay, Nasha. This is a very simple poem, and I started doing some of these types of poetry because at one time there was a poetry festival, and these young kids, they were trying to recite some of my poems, and I said, it's not for little kids to recite these poems because that's not what they're written for. And so I thought about that. And I thought about nation building. I thought about all the things that we're doing. And so what do I need to do for younger people like them to do this? So this poem it says, again, it's always, I'm walking. In the white cornfield, I'm walking. White corn. When I plant white corn seeds or kernels, white corn grows. When I plant yellow corn. When I plant yellow corn seeds, yellow corn grows. Blue corn. When I plant blue corn seeds, blue corn grows. Black corn. When I plant black corn seeds, black corn grows. From the tip of my tongue, the songs of ripening grow. The songs of pollen blow, sounds. I walk. So I'll just go ahead and stop here and pause for questions and answers. And thank you.
Are there questions? We have a microphone.
Comments?
Curiosities?
I'm very happy to hear that the Navajo speakers you're really working with this with poetry. I'm very happy to hear that the Navajo Indians are working a lot with poetry and you're representing this. So my question is if you know that some of the other indigenous tribes around in the US are doing similar. I'm just afraid of all this indigenous knowledge and wisdom like vanishing. So if you could tell something about if you know about that. Thank you.
There are poets writing in different languages, like Ophelia Zepeda from Tohono-O'odham. She writes in Tohono-O'odham. And then there are others. And then most of the poets, especially on Navajo, write in English, but they put in a phrase here and there in Navajo. And then there are Navajo poets who write in English, but when they read, they add extra lines and different things in Navajo. And in that sense, like certain Navajo songs and prayers, when you do a song or a prayer for a patient, sometimes you leave certain lines out or you add more depending on the condition of the patient. So I guess that sense of storytelling is still there even in contemporary poetry. Like some of the songs or some things I do here, I either add or delete depending on where I'm at and what's going on. And I know not criticized, but critiqued by Tony Webster saying, when he did a reading over here, he added this, and when he did another reading over here, he deleted it. And I said, interesting. But the whole idea is, poetry, stories, they're alive. So when you do the reading, or when you tell the stories, they themselves begin to change. And sometimes we don't have control over that because we believe that language is alive And it's out there amongst you now, listening to your hearts and how things are with you. And so do Navajo poets, although they write in English, but when they begin to read, sometimes they add extra in Navajo. And the other interesting for me is one time we had a Navajo language night in Santa Fe at the Santa Fe Indian School. There's this young man that I taught, and I was sort of embarrassed because at the time these young people were, Navajo young people were copying people in Chicago, these all dressed in black and saggy pants, and he was one of those. And I said, oh my goodness, he's going up there. It's embarrassing. I wanted to leave the room. But I decided, no, you can't do that. He's a former student, and he's obviously related to you from Rock Point, so bear with it. And he went up there. And all these others were doing traditional songs or other wonderful stuff. And all of a sudden, he turned this music on, this sort of a rap, I think is what it was. And he started rapping in Navajo. And he told his life story. And I mean, he brought me to tears of how he was using that language in contemporary style, and a powerful story. And so the language itself, I think, when we open it and allow it to be used and express an honest expression in the different forms without criticizing and say there's a bad way, I think more and more of our young people will begin to use the language. When we use text or Facebook, more and more Navajo young people are beginning to post things in Navajo, because I think that's at least a cool thing to do, to show the rest of the world, oh, I write Navajo. And the kind of exchanges that they're having, it's amazing. So I think if we do that and allow our young people to express themselves in different ways, then more and more of them will write in native languages. I'm also with a group called Stories Walking, Reclaiming Rhetorical Sovereignty. We go from different communities, indigenous communities, and work with young people to encourage them to write in their own languages. So there are poets out there, writers out there.
Hi. Thank you so much for your reading. It was really, some of the poems were really moving. I'm actually Tony's student, so from his anecdotes, I know not to ask what a poem means. But I was wondering if you could talk about what inspired you to write the poem, or the one about spring, because that was very interesting to me.
Spring?
Yeah. I think that's what it was called.
Mm-hmm. When we're in public space, we tend to put our better foot forward first. And we tend to talk about what's decent in our culture. It's sort of like looking at someone GQ magazine. But we know that when you close the door, there's all these things going on. And so I know a lot of young people that go out, and so in Navajo we have this great philosophy, this grand philosophy, beauty, balance, harmony. And a lot of people talk about these issues. But for me, it's like, that's true, but how many of us actually practice it? We don't. No. All those sacred places, we disregard them. No. What I'm talking about, it's real. It was out there. I think they painted it over since then. They probably said, we don't want him to see it. And so we talk about respect for woman. We talk about respect for the earth, we address her as a mother. And we talk about a lot of different things in terms of being a female and having high regard for that. But yet, in reality, what are we doing? We're destroying that. And so, as a poet and as a writer, as an artist, you need to tell people, excuse my language, that's a bunch of bullshit. This is the reality. Take a look at it. And sometimes when I read this now, who's chuckle, especially young people. And so when the girls, sometimes they chuckle too. And I said, excuse me, ma'am, why are you laughing at this? Do you think women should be depicted on these barrels with their legs spread, with some of your relatives' name on it? And I say to the guys, what about you? Why are you laughing? That could be your mother or your sister. And so I think that sometimes we have to use our work to address some of these critical problems, to bring to the forefront. Especially if you're talking about honest expression. You can cover it up. And the whole point is not to say Navajos have nasty minds or they're doing this to one another, but to teach them to think critically and creatively about these issues so that they don't pass it on. And sometimes parents might say, oh, young people are like this. Yeah, I know we were. I said, excuse me, they're your children. Who do you think raised these kids? You. How are you talking to your kids and how are you raising your kids that they're doing these things? And so, I guess, I don't know if that's called inspiration or or lashing out or something like that. But the point is, I think we need art in all its forms to offer critique, to offer comments on our society. And to me, spring, it's a spring out of the middle of nowhere, but yet sustain life. It also brings out the Dúchas Táá Kóó Diné is actually the gushing out of water. So even though that's not what the place is, but through language we hope that there's water. That's just but one poem. I have a lot of other poems like that, different things. Next.
Yeah, thank you for this event. It's actually great. And I'm wondering if you can tell us about your experience in writing in two languages, because you translate by yourself your text, right? Or if somebody else, yeah, does that, and then if you also write in both languages, because you read some text only in Navajo, and then you read also some in English, and I was wondering if those texts are, those in Navajo, I believe those were created in Navajo originally, but do you do like the other way around, to write it in English and then translate it into Navajo? And then if you do so, what's like the essence of the poem in that case? Do you feel like it's, you keep like what you want to say in English into Navajo and vice versa? I mean, you mentioned that in that, like the one you read in Navajo, that you couldn't translate it in English because of the sounds, and that's about, I mean, maybe Tony can tell us more about, like this speech play that I know a bit about what Tony writes. So there are some like verbal art. In these sounds, but in those that you write in English, and then you translate it into Navajo, what's like the essence, or what do you think about that?
It is hard to translate. Like this trilingual edition, I really didn't work that hard. They asked me to submit some poems, and so I submitted in Navajo, but then say, do a rough translation. So that's what I did. And I didn't know they would turn into a book like this. Otherwise, I would have worked a little bit extra hard in the translations. The next thing I know, it came out in a book, and so that's why when I read the ones in English, sometimes I change the words to it too. But those, I write mostly in Navajo. And if they're written in Navajo, I guess I wasn't that that mindset. I I'm thinking about things in Navajo and start writing out of that, then it's written in Navajo. And if I'm thinking about something or looking at something, experiencing something in English, then I write in English. So it just depends on the language. Cuando estoy pensando en español, yo escribo en español. And so depending on the language who are you with, and whatever language you're in that mode and you start writing out of that, that's what it comes out. But lately, like the poem Escucho, it's like going back for 3 languages. Because I wanted to experiment and say, this sounds better in Spanish, this sounds better in Navajo, this sounds better in English. And so I want to start writing more like that, I'm thinking. And I studied Japanese, but I haven't been speaking it well lately, but I'm sort of relearning that, and maybe later I'll throw some Japanese in there as well. So we'll see how it works, but it depends. It's a lot of fun. And the other thing too is if I do it right in Navajo, then if I switch to English, the language and the words, they have their own associations and their own histories and so on. So all of a sudden we're trying to translate something, but you end up with an entirely different poem. And say, okay, it's no longer a translation, it has its own poem, but in order for that to succeed as a separate poem, then I need to switch back into that. So then it becomes a different poem. And I try not to translate my own work. I'm horrible at translating, so we let people like Tony earn their pay for doing stuff like that.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you for being with us today. This is for those of us who are writers, a sort of request for mentorship disguised as a question about method. I'm very happy to see that you carry as many notebooks with you as you do, because I oftentimes am doubting whether or not I should be weighing myself with as many things as I insist on carrying around with me. But I find that when I need to put something down on paper, I am deciding by instinct as to sort of like gut instinct as to where to write it down or where to put it down. And I have no systematicity to it, despite the fact that it might appear otherwise due to my variously colored books. And I was wondering if you could speak to why 3 notebooks, where you write things down, when and how they reappear again, and when you revisit them or whatnot.
Why 3 notebooks? Oh, there's more than 3 notebooks. I have several back at the house too, and I mean in the room where I'm staying at. It's sort of a habit. I always carry so many of them. And sometimes I forget that I wrote something, and later on I would go back and flip through them, and then I get back into it, and then add to it. Louis and I were going to the lunch, and like I said, the poem I started off with, I got these brochures and pamphlets on this group. And during lunch, I asked him about his Mapuche language. And he said, well, not many people are beginning to forget because the Catholic priests, they were saying, you need to stop using that language because you need to speak the language of God. God's language, I guess Spanish. And I said, but Jesus spoke Aramaic. You tell him that, not Spanish. And so in that little notebook I had with me, that when I got back to my room, I wrote down and says, Jesus spoke Aramaic. And so there will be a whole poem and idea that will begin to come out of that. So I carry a lot of notebooks with me. And even those sometimes little small notepads, what do you call those, Post-its? Because you always have the right ideas and you have to put them. And sometimes I'm reading a book and then I put it on a Post-it and stick it in there somewhere, and maybe a couple of years later I would open it and it's there. So, oh, I was supposed to be writing about this. But what's interesting is by the time you re-encounter the note again, you have, I guess, subconsciously develop a whole concept around it and about it. And it's sort of amazing then. And I think it's that element of surprise, to be surprised by your own words or at least an idea we're entertaining at one time, that keeps me having different notebooks all over the place, because then you get back to it. I tried one time just to carry one with me all the time. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work. So I do have more than 3 notebooks. So just like reading books, I'm reading about maybe 12, 16 different books right now. And, different places, different times. And so, this is an interesting idea. Isn't that something I encountered in the other books? So you go back and start reading. Then you forget you're reading this book, and you end up carrying this book around and start reading it. So.
Hello, and thank you for speaking today. My question is, why do you write poetry?
What's poetry? I think there are many reasons. One is, as we're growing up, we hear a lot of Navajo stories, coyote stories, stories about animals, and people just, the love of language, what you can do with language and the different ways you can put a story together. Sometimes when we're young people, Grandpa would tell a coyote story, and they go, okay, you now retell it. So we tell it one way, then my brother tells another way, and then nephew tells another way. So you could see the different ways of telling stories. And then the other is, when I was young, I spoke only Navajo until about 8 or 9 years old. But before that, I was training to become a medicine man. So I hung out with my grandpa at these different ceremonies. And so I heard a lot of the songs and the prayers. And then I just liked the way the elders spoke to one another so eloquently, the use of language in ways that you don't hear out in the everyday language. Because medicine people speak with one another in different ways. And just that about fascinating, the way they tell stories. And so I just sort of start playing around with words, how to, that's one. And And then normally people also ask, why writing? Besides poetry writing. I have an essay on writing and the challenges, the Western notions of writing, especially the Belangana, what we call the Anglo-Saxon white. Says, so you're not even using your own alphabet. That's the Roman alphabet. Like, don't tell me that we don't know how to write. Because for me, sand paintings, the body paintings, the writings, and the paintings on the prayer sticks. Now, to me, all those are forms of writing. And all those forms of writing are used for healing, to retell the stories on the bodies, the stories of the gods on the bodies of people, on the earth, and allow them to heal through that. So for me, writing has always been a source of healing, of a spiritual well-being. And so a lot of my writing continues to be that. Whether it's a social issue like spring, but it's trying to be done in a way where it allows people to not only think and reflect critically, but at the same time, allow them to heal through the language itself. So I guess why poetry? It's an exciting way to use language to help stories that heal.
Thank you very much for sharing all this afternoon with us. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about the political relevance of poetry and language nowadays?
To repeat that one more time.
What do you think, how do you work on the political aspect of poetry and language nowadays?
I'm not sure if I understand your...
Probably what I'm trying to say is that poetry and language together can have a strong aspect of a political intervention also. So if you could tell us a little bit on how you think about your work, if you think about your work in that area, I'd like to know.
Poetry, language, and politics. Well, I don't know anything about politics. Earlier, we had a little meeting in that corner. We shared some poems, and I was asked about being an activist and how we use our work. And I said, I don't think of my work as an activist, being in that sense. I said, to me, it's a celebration of language, a celebration of life. But I think when I write in Navajo, publish in Navajo, when I do things in Navajo, it is a celebration of life. But at the same time, it's like ignoring the rest of America, saying, I don't care about you. So I guess in that sense, it's political and resistance and active in its own way. But I don't tap into necessarily the That's one. But I do have poems and stories, and we do write plays on politics and how like I have poems about Arizona passing English-only laws and what it does to people. And I'm writing a poem now about Trump and the wall. And you know about the no to the Dakota pipeline, no dapple, NODAPL. So I have a poem beginning on that that says something, looking at the first letter of each one, that says, number 1, dump all pollution lustingly. And if there's such a word as lustingly, I don't care. I'm a poet. I have the license to change language. And one time I had a poem that talks about the long walk, and this Navajo would be coming back, but because they're so tired, they would leave their babies behind on the brushes. And when they look back, they would see crows attacking the babies. So I talk about that, and along that it says, and I stride it into Arizona. Of course, Arizona wasn't state then, but at the same time, when I use word like I stride it, it's like people say, it's strode, it's this, is like, so I don't care. So in that sense, then you use language to I guess, violate what people would consider normal English, because when they teach you to speak formal English, it's their sense of control. You're no longer accessing what you're truly feeling. So you do things like that with language to be, I guess, active, be an activist. You use their own language to change that language to begin to push back at what they sense is reality. So poetry, language, and politics, I guess, plays together in many ways.
If there's one more question, and then we'll retire to have him sign some books.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you again. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this question. You had mentioned previously that the difficulty in translating Navajo sometimes isn't a matter of the context or the content of it, but the sound. Being a medicine man, when you sing or speak the sacred texts, the rhythm or the beat in which you deliver that text, is there a deeper meaning to that? And if so, when the younger generation, when they're utilizing Navajo in the native form, but to the beat or the rhythm of, say, the contemporary hip-hop music, is there a loss of a deeper meaning in that?
I'd like to believe that because language is alive and it's in its own way, that it has the capacity to move with all forms of expression, that cultures evolve, the human mind evolves, the human spirit evolves. And so at the core and in essence, one example I use is, it's like going to the depth of the earth, the core is all molten, it's lava and all that. But the surface is very different. So if you're able to get to that core of the earth, you can surface anywhere and still be at the heart, be the heart of the earth, to be the heartbeat. So language, I think, is like that. Like I started earlier, the more distinctly Navajo I become, at least in my thinking, I realize that more people respond to that because I get to the core of that core of humanity. So to me, language is like that. So there are different forms of expression. Language responds to the heartbeats, different heartbeats, but it's still the same. And so I don't think the strength and power of language gets lost if it's in hip hop or or Navajo, which are traditional. It's just a matter of who's doing what. So that's a hard question. It's really hard to explain, I think. I heard somewhere that, when Navajo sing, I guess when you sing the rhythm and all that, they put it on a bar that goes like this. So if the Navajo sings, it's a little bit, you begin to draw the outline of the landscape, like there's little mountains, and whereas if you do it in New York City, it's like, so I guess there's a certain rhythm that changes. But it is a hard question. But like I said, I try to be as open as possible. I mean, it's nice to try to save language in a certain way. And I think when you begin to do that, you begin to buy into this notion of romanticism, and idealism, and you begin to become judgmental and begin to deny honest expressions of younger people fitting into the contemporary world. And so, but I think there's room for both. Thank you.